Wyoming 1992, cold case solved. Arrest shocks community. The room had not aged so much as it had stopped. Air held in a dry hush, linoleum scabbed with old tape, Venetian blinds pinned at a half-angle that remembered dusk. Dust leaned on everything, smug with time. On the table lay the box that once defined a town's fear, a banker's rectangle of cardboard with a split corner, its catalog number bleached to a ghost. Detective Rowan Hale stood in the door and let the chill come up through his shoes. He did not speak. Silence felt earned here. In the box, one girl's life in evidence bags, misfiled prayers, and a map with a tear through the creek. Her name had been Sariah Cole, 26, cashier at the Sinclair off Route 191, volunteer at the library on Wednesdays. Lived alone in a mustard-colored duplex on Center Street, second unit, upstairs. Owners said she watered the plants too much. Born in Rawlins, raised on roadside motels and late bills, she kept receipts as if they could be stitched into a quilt of intention. On September 9, 1992, she locked the gas station at 10, failed to show at the library the next day, and was found 3 days later in a dry draw north of Pinedale where the wind talks low, like someone trying not to wake the sleeping. The file called it blunt force trauma without flourish. The autopsy summary was deliberate. Contusions, subdural hemorrhage, defensive wounds on the right hand, approximate time of death between 10:40 p.m. and midnight. No sexual assault indicated. Clothing intact. Black jeans, faded blue work shirt with a Sinclair patch, sneakers without laces. Someone had removed them after. Purse missing. No wallet recovered. A tire track near the draw that matched nothing. Half print, partial sipping. Forensics in 92 were analog prayers. Photographs under buzzing lights. Powder that made fingerprints like snowflakes doomed to melt. The case stalled in winter and then fell through spring, and the town learned how to keep space around the memory. Rowan had not worked it then. He was 21 that year, just off reserve duty, learning to prefer the precision of quiet to the roar of certainty. He entered the room now as he had entered a church in childhood, measuring each footfall. Sariah's photograph stared out of a plastic sleeve. Brown hair under a messy cut she'd done herself, a small mouth that seemed mid-thought, eyes with that plain Western boldness, not trying for anything more than light. He found the first report, handwritten on a thick form, that named the caller who reported a vehicle pulled over near the draw. White Ford, older, followed by a scratch-out and an initial that the ink had bled through. He read it slowly, his lips barely moving, as if sounding out a new alphabet. The room smelled of old paper, a dry, bread-like scent mixed with the faint iodine of developing fluid that had leaked from a cracked jar years ago. In the corner, a metal fan held a fragment of cobweb that climbed like a little hand toward the switch. He clicked it on. It stirred the dust enough to show the private weather of a room that thinks it is sealed from time. "This case is active," was all the memo on the door said. It had not been, not in any way beyond the ritual of anniversaries and the occasional letter to the editor wondering how a place so small could fail to account for one of its own. The sheriff in 92 had died. The lead detective had moved to Arizona. Several names in the witness list were now obituaries that said "loved the outdoors," as if that absolved anything. Rowan pulled on nitrile gloves. They snapped soft, a blue whisper in the stale air. He let the box tell its order. Bag A, photographs, Bag B, clothing samples, Bag C, dirt and plant material, Bag D, misc, a category that offended him on principle. He kept his hand steady, not from ritual but from the simple belief that sudden movement disrespects the dead. He thought of what the room had missed in all those years. Birthdays not had, small romances, the way a hand learns to reach for a light switch in the dark without looking. Records preserved everything but the elasticity of a person. There had been suspects, all of them imperfect. A boyfriend who wasn't a boyfriend, a drifter seen near Boulder Lake, an assistant manager who said he was home watching Nightline. Without DNA, there had been only the eddies of rumor and the blindfolded art of small-town hunch. Sariah's mother had held Rowan's hand last month when he'd met her in a nursing home that smelled like orange cleanser and ginkgo, and asked him why the box was not yet empty. He had answered with the uniform's vocabulary, reviewing, prioritizing, seeking cooperation. She had nodded as if those words were soft animals you could pet to sleep. He took out the map. It was the old county topo with coffee stains and penciled annotations that climbed the margin. Drag marks here, Beerkens X3, cattle gate chain. The tear through the creek was accidental or metaphor. He didn't assign it significance. He placed it under the weight of a stapler and let it flatten, lines like veins of ore exposed under dull light. Time, he knew, is not a detective's enemy. It is a solvent, a sieve, a trickster. Sometimes it brings things up, sometimes it covers them. But now there was something new, something that had made this room wake. It waited in a separate envelope on his desk, outside the box, the reason he had the key again, the reason his phone had rung with a voice saying, "You'll want to see this." He did not open the envelope yet. Instead, he closed his eyes and rehearsed the ground, to re-enter without arrogance, to let Sariah be a person before a puzzle. A folded, handwritten note had been tucked under the map, not part of the official file, just a piece of lined paper creased into neat sevenths. He slid it out. The handwriting was careful but tired. If no one calls by Friday, check the negatives. No signature. Ink faded to a gray-brown. The date, October 2, 1992. He put it aside, a small, aged flare. Outside, wind sketched at the eaves. The blinds barely clicked. Rowan returned the note to the bag and wrote the date in his own notebook, clean and small. He looked again at the photograph of Sariah. He thought of how the town would speak if the box opened into a story with names. They think justice is a switch. It is. It's a machine that counts, measures, calibrates. It tries to replace the weight of one person with the weight of process. He adjusted the blinds by 2 slats. The light sharpened on the cardboard. The luckless fan hissed and then steadied. The room was ready. 2. Case reopens due to discovery of new crucial evidence. It began with a nuisance call that was. 2 months earlier, the county clerk's office had started digitizing old property records. A copy tech with a soft cough pulled a 4-drawer file cabinet away from the wall in the basement and found a manila envelope wedged behind it, unlabeled, sticky with age, heavy in a way that meant film or paper money. Inside, 535 negatives, curled like pondweed, one strip still in its protective sleeve with Rixol photo stamped in bright July colors now turned autumn. A typed note, "Hold for Detective Lafferty," the man who'd taken Sariah's case first. The envelope had never made it to him. The clerk's office called the sheriff's office, who laughed and then didn't. The envelope came to Rowan with the county seal in blue ballpoint and a chain of custody form backdated by 33 years. Rowan let the lab handle it. Even old emulsion can confess. The negatives were cleaned, scanned at high resolution, and coaxed into images that were half artifact, half revival. 4 were of the Sinclair station's back room, breaker box, shelves of oil, a pegboard with 2 flashlights and a missing 3rd. The 5th was different. A close-up of the gas station's cash drawer pulled open, bills still fanned, a receipt pinned under a rubber band, and in the corner of the frame, a wrist and a watch, blurred but legible enough to read a time if you leaned in and believed. The time was 10:53 p.m. That mattered. The manager had said he left at 10:35. Sariah clocked out at 10:41, according to the punch card photographed earlier. The call reporting a car by the draw came in at 11:22. The photograph cut into their alibis and stitched a new seam. If the drawer was open at 10:53 with the manager gone, someone else had hands in the register. A robbery. But inventory reports showed no significant loss. Sariah's purse was missing, yes, but most of her pay was direct deposit. The gas station kept little cash on hand midweek. The logic failed at greed. Rowan printed the photographs on mat and took them into the light, not trusting screens. The wrist in the frame wore a watch with a steel band and a dark face. That watch would be a generic artifact if not for the scratch near the 2 o'clock mark, shallow, diagonal like a comet. People keep their scratches. He laid the prints in a row and used a straight edge to trace angles, the counter's corner, the cash tray lip, the rubber band's curve. He took notes without flourish. He circled the watch. He wrote, "Consult with archival photos of staff." He went to the storage room where old employment packets lived in plastic totes like fossils. He extracted a personnel file for the Sinclair, staff photos for scheduling, Polaroids with first names. He did not expect the miracle of a watch display. He expected the dull hope of coincidence. He got something quieter. A staff birthday party photo from late August '92, sheet cake on the counter, balloon slumped to a comma, faces in the fluorescent tilt that makes skin look like paper. In the foreground, the assistant manager, Matthew Pike, 29, hair parted hard, wearing a steel band watch with a dark face. You could not see a scratch. The image was too blunt, but he held the print next to the negative scan and imagined the notch. He sent the negatives back for one more pass, grain reduction, contrast curves, a light-handed push on the midtones. The result did not gift him certainty. It gave him a stronger suggestion. The scratch looked intentional now, as if born from a habit of scraping counters or doors. He told himself not to romanticize data. He wrote, possibly Pike. He left a square next to it and didn't check it. The other newly found negative was a shot of the back parking lot with a smear of tail light, and in the far left, a cardboard box with OCT returns in Sharpie. The date didn't make sense. The murder was September. Then he remembered the way retail names months in advance. You keep October things ready in September. This meant the photo was taken late enough to have the box staged. It was the nothing that steadies a timeline. The case reopened officially with a memo and even softer ceremony. The sheriff, a practical man who measured his words like drafting a fence, said, "New material, limited distribution. Hail your point." Rowan nodded. The press got 3 lines and a morsel, recently recovered photographic evidence. On Facebook, someone wrote that it had to be DNA. Someone else wrote about God's timing. Sariah's mother was told quietly. She asked if the detective believed in second lives for cases. Rowan said, "I believe in new light." He signed out the old evidence and the new, logged every movement like a litany. He asked for the original call tapes and found they had been recorded over in '97. He wasn't surprised. He asked for the crime scene photos at the draw and found 3 angles that had never made the file. A photographer's cut disc labeled MISC that had survived the upgrade from film to CD to the present. In one, a styrofoam cup sat half buried in the sand near the drag marks. On it, a dark ellipse where someone had pressed a thumb in coffee. The lab couldn't pull a print from sand-stained foam 3 decades old, but they could tell him the coffee contained a trace of cinnamon. Small, useless fact, but later such facts insist on themselves. He returned to the Sinclair. It was a boutique now, selling hats and leather goods that made the wind look expensive. He stood in the doorway and breathed paint and cedar. The space knew his shoes from other visits, other ghosts. The owner was new to the town and liked writing emails more than speaking. Rowan walked the floor and located the old counter by the position of the surviving conduit. He placed his hand in the air where the cash drawer had once been, as if he could catch the warmth left by someone's arm. Wind pawed the glass. He wrote in his notebook, "Angle of camera suggests employee vantage. Photo taken deliberately, not for memory." Who had taken the photograph? The negatives had sat behind a file cabinet, not in a camera bag or a family album. The typed note to Lafferty implied an intention that failed. Perhaps a clerk meant to hand them off and then forgot. Perhaps someone wanted to help and then lost nerve. The decision to photograph the cash drawer at 10:53 p.m. was not casual. It was either a record of wrongdoing or a rehearsal for a confession. Rowan put the envelope back in the safe. He slept like rocks under ice. 3 investigator examines, past reports to identify overlooked details. He spent the next week reading. Not a binge, not a hunt, reading as method, like walking a fence line after winter. The reports were not incompetent, just human. They breathed, made typos, circled the same doubts. He transcribed every time. He gave the case a new clock. Patrol Report 90992-22-18. Lights off at Sinclair, noted mop bucket near back door. That detail had done no work for 30 years. He penciled it in. When he visited janitorial supply, he learned some gas stations used a cinnamon-scented cleaner in the 90s because it masked the chemical tang. He wrote cinnamon and underlined it without knowing why. Interview 9-10-92-13-05. Customer Mrs. L said Sariah had been saving for winter tires and didn't like driving in the ruts after a rain. That contradicted the general picture, Sariah as reckless with plants, not with money. He noted, she saved for necessities. Missing purse suggested not a theft of windfall but of identity. Autopsy Addendum 9-13-92. Laceration pattern suggests object with straight edge, width approximately 1.75 inches. He measured tools in his mind. Tire iron, flashlight. The Sinclair used heavy metal flashlights with a flat lip. One had been missing on the pegboard in the backroom photo. He wrote flashlight 3 and drew a little box, then a line through it. Witness statement 9-11-92-09-20. A ranch hand reported seeing a white Ford near the draw. The detective at the time had scratched the word older, then initialed it. The call who brought in the note about Friday and negatives was that the same hand. He compared the initials. They did not match. Separate hands, separate scruples. There was a note about Sariah's calendar. Library Wednesdays, church occasional, a dentist appointment she missed on 9/12. A margin doodle of a square house with smoke and a tiny tree. People build their adult lives like children do, with symbols and repetition. He felt that gentle ache at the fact of it. He found photographs of the Sinclair safe. It had been locked. Manager said only he had the code plus the owner plus the assistant manager in emergencies. He found a memo from June 92, unsigned, typed brown by an old ribbon. Reset combination monthly. Handwritten below, didn't do August. He underlined it, a small betrayal of a policy that often becomes plot. He requested banking records. The wires came back slow and then sudden like snowmelt. Sariah's account showed a cash deposit of $80 on 9/08 from tips and errands. He listed, could be cigarettes, petty cash swap, or family repayment. He asked the library about late fees she would have paid. The old librarian, hands like shredded tissue, said Sariah returned everything early. He liked that. It made her mortal in a careful way. Past reports documented Matthew Pike's alibi. Home from 10:30, watched Nightland, fell asleep. His wife, then 23, corroborated with a note of apology. He works hard. They had divorced in 99. The report noted nothing about his watch. Photographs from that era caught it intermittently, a wedding photo, a Halloween party at the Legion. The band matched, the face matched. Rowan marked a trend line of superficial sameness. Another suspect, a drifter called RJ who camped near the river, had been seen panhandling at the station that week. The report described him as polite, smelled of pine cleaner, spoke of God. He had an outstanding warrant in Utah that drew the investigation's attention like a magnet pulls pins. They leaned into him for a time, then let him go when a bus ticket showed him in Rock Springs before 10:45. The file stuck a post-it, RJ cleared, to calm future auditors. There was a maintenance log for the station, a breaker issue on the night of the murder. The electrician had never been interviewed in depth. The note read, breaker tripped at 9:50, reset 9:55, backdoor jam loose. He found the electrician, now retired, hands still black in the cuticles from a trade that can't be washed out. The man remembered Sariah as cheerful, efficient, and the assistant manager as always looking at his watch. He laughed the way men do when they remember someone else's nervousness. That fellow wore his time like it owed him, he said. Rowan wrote the words exactly. The overlooked detail that bent his neck was small enough to live between staples. In the evidence log, the chain of custody sheet for the negatives, the ones found behind the cabinet, should not have existed in that file at all. It belonged to property, not homicide. Attached to it by a single shiny staple was a photocopy of a handwritten receipt for photo processing, Rick Saul. The date was September 10. The name on the receipt was not Sariah's. It was M. Pike. The amounts were insignificant: $4.59 for a set of prints, $2.99 for a second set. Rush circled. No one had connected it to anything in '92. Maybe they were Pike's vacation photos. Maybe he'd been the one to drop off the Sinclair's film after the incident to keep copies for the store's records. Or maybe... He breathed out slow, let the mouth go slack the way shooters do to avoid distance between eye and sight. He found a report about someone, name redacted, returning to the station on 9/10 to assist with inventory. The assistant manager had keys, naturally. He had the authority to clean up, to count, to say this is for the police and this is not. He had declared a flashlight missing but could not say when it had gone. Rowan revisited the map. The torn creek line bothered him now, not because of omen but because the tear exposed the layers beneath. Under the topographic sheet, someone had once taped a second piece of paper, removed it and torn the map. That second sheet might have been a list, a sketch, or a copy of the negative log. The two strips of old tape residue were still there, squared exactly 3 inches apart. It suggested a habit. Whoever built this cross-reference wanted things aligned. The cross-referencer wasn't the lead detective. Lafferty's note slouched. It felt like a clerk's habit. He went back to the note. If no one calls by Friday, check the negatives. Anonymous is a word for people afraid of being right. The Friday in question would have been October 2, 1992. Lafferty had already started running on the drifter by then. A clerk might have thought, if you won't see what's in front of you, I'll pin it under your gaze. And then the envelope slid, literal and figurative, behind a cabinet. He reread the interview with the assistant manager's wife. The halting syntax struck him. He was home by 10-something. He said there was trouble at the store, but it wasn't like terrible. He was upset because of procedures. He didn't like when people didn't do procedures. She had apologized for the imprecision then, and the detective had let it pass. Rowan, 33 years later, heard a different note. A man more loyal to a manual than to a person. He cross-checked Sariah's last known phone call. At 10:19 to her mother, 3 minutes, just checking in. The next was an unanswered call at 10:46 to the station's landline from a number that belonged to the owner's house. The owner lived 5 minutes away. Rowan drove that route at night, as if inheriting the distance could give him something extra. His tires hummed on the old asphalt. The wind wheeled sky into a low, black plane. Back at his desk, he arranged the pieces like someone setting out surgical tools. Watch, flashlight, mop bucket, cinnamon cleaner, inventory, stapled receipt, anonymous note, missing purse, unmissing cash. None of it proved anything yet. But in the very human clutter, a line emerged, the kind a plot doesn't make but procedure does. He turned off the fan and let the room become still. He would ask for Pike's watch. He would not ask for permission. He would do it with quiet restraint. The clock on the wall said 10:53 at the moment the building's power flickered and returned. No metaphor intended. He looked at the second hand bite the minute and thought, not for the last time, that time doesn't heal. It reveals. They gathered like faded constellations, points that once shone brightly in separate corners of the investigation, but had never aligned. Rowan set their names in a column on the whiteboard, black marker deliberate and even. 1. Matthew Pike, assistant manager. 2. R.J., transient laborer, cleared once. 3. Lorne Weaver, station owner. 4. Evelyn Pike, ex-wife. 5. Unknown clerk, author of the note. Each name carried a faint hum of guilt, the kind that travels under skin instead of through speech. He began with Pike. Ambitious, procedural, the sort of man who laminated rules. He'd been at the station 2 years before Sariah arrived. The staff described him as organized and not cruel, just impatient. He had motive only in the form of frustration. Reports showed a memo he'd sent the week before, citing cash count discrepancies and lax closing protocols. Sariah had written a short reply, apologizing and promising to improve. The letter was stapled to her personnel file, an irony too sharp to ignore. If Pike saw her as a liability, perhaps the night's argument was not about money but defiance. R.J. came next. Homeless, itinerant, and remembered mostly as a shape lean, bearded, a canvas jacket with missing buttons. He had been seen in the area days before asking for work. No known connection to Sariah, but the river washed out timelines easily and cleared in the 90s meant something softer than exonerated. Rowan reopened the bus record. RJ bought a ticket, yes, but paid in cash. No photograph, no security footage, no proof he boarded. A ticket could also be a shield. Weaver, the owner, was 76 now, retired in Idaho. His interviews from 1992 read like minutes from a board meeting. Detached, rehearsed, claimed ignorance of staff tension. But a ledger from that year showed inventory loss adjustment, $128 unaccounted for, filed 1 day after the murder. Weaver's signature at the bottom was neat, but above it, faint pencil arithmetic suggested someone had rewritten the numbers. Rowan circled that page. Embezzlement was unlikely, petty falsification more probable. Still, guilt breeds in corners. Then Evelyn Pike, the ex-wife, surfaced in an unprompted call. "I heard the case was reopened," she said, her voice calm with the exhaustion of someone who'd already told the truth once. "You're going to find it's about control. That's all he ever wanted, control and cleanliness." Rowan asked if she remembered his watch. "He wore it everywhere, even to bed, said he needed to feel the time." A pause. "He sold it, though, years ago, I think at a pawn shop. Said it reminded him of something bad." She didn't say of whom. Her breath at the end of the call sounded like fabric torn from nails. And then there was the unknown clerk. Someone had typed that note, "Hold for Detective Lafferty," and someone else had written the Friday message. The typeface on the label matched the courthouse's IBM Selectric Model III used by administrative staff. Rowan requested the personnel list from that year. 11 names, 2 still in the county. One, Doris Keeley, now 73, had worked in the evidence room then. When he visited, she sat in a sunlit apartment smelling of liniment and dry biscuits. "I remember that girl," she said without prompting. "They sent us her things, but not everything matched the manifest. I told Lafferty. He said to leave it." She leaned forward. "He was wrong." "You wrote the note." Her eyes steadied. "Typed it. The handwriting wasn't mine. I thought he'd read it." "Who wrote it?" "I never knew. Someone in the station. Maybe the same one who developed those photos. They came in through the front desk." She handed him a folder she'd kept all these years, unlogged. Inside, a single photo, a duplicate from the same negative series, cropped tighter on the wrist with the watch. This one caught the faint reflection of a second figure in the cash drawer glass. The silhouette was blurry, smaller, maybe female, maybe Sariah. The suspects were no longer people but coordinates in time, lines intersecting in one humid, fluorescent night. Each had reason enough to be ordinary, and that ordinariness was the hardest thing to pierce. 5. Clues emerged slowly, linking inconsistencies to emotional conflicts. It was always the little things. A misplaced comma in a report, a time card without an initial, a habit unnoticed. Rowan rewatched the station's floor plan. In 1992, the office had a mirror opposite the counter. Anyone standing there would have been visible from the cash register, but reversed. The photographer of that 10:53 image must have been facing the mirror, meaning the watch on the right wrist appeared left. Pike wore his watch on his right. Not a coincidence, but confirmation. Yet the shadow in the drawer reflection complicated it. It leaned, head tilted, as if speaking. Not a confrontation, something quieter, perhaps a conversation gone wrong. He cross-checked the crime scene soil with the janitorial supply invoice from that week. The cleaner's brand matched the cinnamon-scented type used only in the backroom mop. On Sariah's shoe sole, residue from that same chemical. She hadn't made it far before falling. She'd been near the bucket. A defensive struggle there, unreported, unnoticed, hidden under procedural blindness. The emotional trail was subtler. Sariah had filed a request for shift change a week before her death, citing schedule stress. The note bore Pike's denial in red pen, staffing insufficient, declined. HR copied it but never reviewed it. In her locker inventory, a small spiral notebook. First pages were grocery lists. The last contained a line written 3 times, "Don't stay late alone." Rowan stared at that page until the ink's indentation caught light. It wasn't a diary, it was a rehearsal for courage. He reconstructed the night. 10:40, Sariah closes the till, mops. 10:45, Pike checks inventory, notes flashlight missing. 10:50, she counts change, opens drawer for reconciliation. 10:53, photo taken, showing open till in Pike's wrist. 11:00, argument, she refuses to adjust log. 11:20, car scene near draw. The motive wasn't money, it was pride and anger woven through professionalism. Pike had built his worth on procedures. Sariah challenged that sanctum by following them differently. She reported him once for clocking out early on supply runs. The file noted it quietly. Rowan tracked down the pawn shop. The owner, a man with gums like dark clay, recalled the watch. Had a scratch like a tiny lightning bolt. Sold maybe 10 years ago, traded for $50 and a promise he'd buy it back. Never did. The log listed the seller as M. Pike, confirmed by driver's license. The watch remained in storage. When retrieved,